All right, ELD with Brainstorm MTG back with some legacy action filmed live at Scholars Games in Brockton, Massachusetts. This was a Saturday event, so a bit more competitive here and better prizes, of course, on the line. And we have Storm versus Elliot, who is on Goblins. I am the Storm player in these matchups. And Elliot and I actually got paired up in the Tabernacle event last month, and we ended up drawing into the top 8. Of course, Goblins got to be one of Storm's best possible matchups. He wreaked havoc on the Sneak and Show players, the Death and Taxes players, but in general, really not looking to play against a deck that plays almost exclusively on the stack. Of course, there's the extra rub-ins, and that Storm can sometimes be the better Goblin deck, putting out up to 20 plus Goblins on the first turn. And here we go. We've got Gitaxian Probe to see a hand with Aether Vials, Goblin Lackey, Ringleader, and Siege Gang. No land destruction there. It looks like a Bloodstained Mire and a Mountain. So just kind of a generally fair-ish hand for Goblins. Type of hand that would be extremely difficult for Death and Taxes to handle, particularly if Goblins were on the draw. Lackey, one of those creatures so powerful when it connects, but really has gone down in terms of its overall stock once Deathrite Shaman was printed. So it's been a long time since Goblins was, kind of the big menace in the format, but still a very potent deck, and that's one of the great things about Legacy. There is just so many great decks. Even though if they're not considered tier 1, they can still do extremely well because the power level is just through the roof. Hitting with a Goblin Lackey, we could see a Ringleader or a Siege Gang coming down on turn 2, which would wreak havoc on so many different decks in the format. And here we go. Goblins gonna get a turn. That Volcanic Island having set up a Brainstorm turn. And we've got Lackey. The dangerous thing about Storm, every turn could just be the last of the game as far as the defending player knows. Until they actually get to see that hand, it's very difficult to play against all of those question marks. So many different combinations can just lead to sudden death, especially when you don't have any type of counter magic. Now, Goblins does have access to discard, very often just in the sideboard, as well as some other disruptive cards, and we'll get to those for games 2 and possibly 3. And now it is time to assess the hand. It looks like some rituals. There's a ponder. Very tempting from against Goblins to just go with a huge Empty the Warrens. It is always fun to beat Goblins with Goblins, but one thing to consider is this list does run Goblin Sharpshooter, and that can mop up a bunch of 1/1s very, very easily. And Ponder does not find the goods. Elliot going to go ahead and shuffle up. It looks like that Dark Petition. At the top of the hand, likely to be cast here. Drawing off of Ponder. There's a Probe. Another Aether Vial drawn, so no real difference there. And there's a Lion's Eye Diamond. That is going to make that Dark Petition even better. So it looks like I have no choice but to go for it here. Multiple Lion's Eye Diamonds. We've got a Dark Ritual, Storm 5, 3 black floating. 6 cards in the graveyard. And Rain of Filth on top. That's a card that some players may not be overly familiar with. For only 1 black, it makes all of your lands able to sack for a black mana. Great all-in card. Really can generate a bunch of extra black mana out of nowhere in those long grindy games where you may have, up to 4 or 5 lands on the board. Can also get value out of your fetch lands, even if you've already fetched up all the lands in the deck, which is a thing that happens. So it looks like all the mana in the world here floating. We've got rituals flying around, double Lion's Eye Diamond, and it's just a question of how do you want to do this. Storm is 7. with 8 black, getting a couple of and Past in Flames here. So here we go. Past in Flames is going to allow the replaying of all the rituals. Another possible line there may have been Infernal for Infernal, depending on how much mana exactly was floating. Chaining Infernal Tutor is a very easy way to just spend 2 mana per additional storm count. Can really help when you get up to storm 7, 8-ish range, and you just have so much mana floating and you want to be able to win, but not open yourself up to any type of secret graveyard hate. Cards like Surgical Extraction or Fairy Macabre, which can be problematic. You know, if your bombs are resolving, they almost certainly don't have a Force of Will or a counter spell, but sometimes they can still have that graveyard hate, and often very wise to play around that. Elliot going to make me go through the motions here. We've got a bunch of ritual effects, and then actually going to cut it a little bit short here. The Tendrils shown from the deck, and that's enough for the scoop. So going into Game 2, of course, I'd like to thank Scholars Games in Brockton, Massachusetts, where this matchup was filmed. There'll be an upcoming Legacy event March 10th. That's 2018 if you are watching from the future. Wouldn't want you to be disappointed there if we happen to not be running an event in future years on March 10th. But this upcoming one will certainly be a blast. We're going to be doing a lot of promotion for that event, and hopefully getting back up toward those numbers that we had when the shop first opened. Actually had a few of the events over 50 players, which is just a great time getting that many people who love Legacy into one place to just have some great games and play for some awesome prizes. Of course, one nice thing with Storm, very unlikely to go to time. That's actually one of the reasons why I started shuffling this list up again. I do a lot of trading in between rounds, so if you're ever looking for any cards for Vintage or Legacy, I have you covered. We're talking dual lands, power, Force of Wills, you name it. I have an extensive collection, and it is all available for trade, and you can always head over to Brainstorm MTG or send me a message at eld@Brainstorm MTG to inquire. So it looks like Elliot has a lot of options here and not a lot of sleeves, so he's going to have to switch some cards in between sleeves. Who hasn't been there? Funny enough, I did play against Elliot the Toys and Things event a prior weekend in between that Tabernacle event and this one. And funny enough, he actually, in Game 2, opened up with an Aether Vial, and I had a very easy combo hand, and on his turn he played another 1 Casting Cost Artifact and passed, and I proceeded to combo out, playing into a Past in Flames for lethal, and then he pointed out that that other 1 Casting Cost Artifact is actually Grafdigger's Cage. I had completely misread the card and proceeded to just play right into a cage. Of course, there is no justice. I did have another exceptional hand in Game 3 and just rolled him while I was on the play, joking that that was the whole idea, being able to be on the play for Game 3, basically a guaranteed win. So laughs were had, lessons were learned, and Elliot definitely looking to get that match back at some point. And we will see if I can avoid any type of heinous misplays in this matchup again. Goblins can give a false sense of security. Of course, they cannot interact with you in very many ways using the stack. They may have cards like Fairy Macabre or Surgical Extraction to be able to mess with the graveyard at instant speed, but most everything else is either going to be at sorcery speed or it's going to be on the board. So those type of effects, of course, very easy to play around here. And we've got a ton of fast mana here. 3 Lotus Petals and Lion's Eye Diamond along with a Brainstorm. So this hand could be extremely explosive. And we'll see if there's anything Elliot can do about that. He is on the play. A Cabal Therapy naming Lotus Petal would be brutal. He'd have no real way of knowing that, however. Oh no, Chalice of the Void at 0. That is going to blank 4 out of the 7 cards in hand. Oh, and drew Infernal Tutor. That is brutal. That would have been an easy turn 1 win right there. Brainstorming into just about anything other than lands would have guaranteed all but a win. And we've got a fetch land. Wow, that Chalice really earning its price tag there. One of those cards that has shot up dramatically in price over the years. And we'll see if that's going to be in Masters 25. Certainly a prime candidate for reprint in terms of value. That set has a ton of buzz around it. You've got to think that Hasbro wants Wizards to swing for the fences and really put out a bestseller, especially after Iconic Masters being the flop that it was. And now we've got Ponder. Those cards have to be damn good to stay on top. At this point, Chain of Vapor or Hurkyl's Recall going to be cards that are really powerful and actually have a keep there. And it looks like Brainstorm. So Brainstorm with the fetch land looking like the line here. We'll see if that fetch land is available. And no fetch land is there. Interesting. So Ponder, leaving those cards on top. Double fetch from Elliott. Jammed an immediate Brainstorm in response. One of those tempting plays when an opponent who potentially has Red Blast or Pyroblast cracks those fetches. It is tempting to get that in while the shields are down. Perhaps a bit hasty. And we've got a couple of Badlands. Badlands and Scrublands. Two of the most maligned dual lands. Of course, they still do their job and allow you to play your spells. I argue that the description of the card is built right into the name. And here we go. 2 mana. And a Wasteland for a 3 mana Goblin Warchief. That is going to make all of his goblins cost 1 less, and also, perhaps equally, perhaps even more important, give them haste, really accelerating the clock. That is perhaps the most fundamental difference in between creatures and spells in Magic. Spells having those immediate impacts, and creatures generally having to wait a turn before they truly impact the board. Since day one, that has been a huge problem with creature-based strategies, and cards like Warchief really improving every creature in the deck. Cards like Siege Gang Commander turning into practically a ball lightning that sticks around. So powerful. Of course, power is relative. Storm, able to actually mop up an entire game in just a single main phase full of playing spells. And we've got Probe again. And that's going to show some goblins right there. We have a Tuk-Tuk, a Siege Gang, a Tarfire, and a Goblin Chieftain. Tarfire, a nice little bit of range, perhaps not worth leaving in. We'll see. It's been quite some time since I've sleeved up Dark Confidant as a sideboard option in Storm. And 2 mana for Infernal Tutor, revealing Brainstorm. So this is really the second time this tournament so far that I've used Infernal, not for a win, but just to fetch a duplicate copy of a card. Certainly worked out last time. We'll see if it does in this match. All right, so Elliott, a bunch of goblins in hand, gets a fresh draw for the turn, and drew a Chalice at 1. That is brutal. What a tempo swing right there. So the setup of the turn before, now effectively complete waste. So both of those Brainstorms shut off. What a devastating draw from Elliott. Just brutal. Wow, and the Wasteland knocking down to just 2 mana and drew another Lotus Petal. So many 0 casting cost artifacts here. Brainstorms, just all dead cards. What a brutal turn of events here. We've got 2 mana for a Goblin Chieftain. That's going to give +1/+1 and haste to all goblins, so double haste. Another land that can fetch a Underground or the Lone Island, the only 2 lands left in the deck. And now at 2 life, very problematic. If that Chalice at 1 goes away, Tarfire will be lethal. What a terrible situation here in a quick turn of events. Really showcasing the power of Chalice of the Void here. Such an effective way to shut off all of that fast mana. And of course, the other side of the fast mana is Lion's Eye Diamond, perhaps the best way for Infernal Tutor to go Hellbent. So not only denying the mana, but also stopping the Tutor ability. And we've got a Brainstorm being cast, Elliott not missing his trigger. There we have Lion's Eye Diamond, Lotus Petal, Lotus Petal, Lotus Petal, Building Storm, Basic Island, and a Brainstorm, and then Infernal. And without the mana, that is going to do it. So able to empty the hand and go Hellbent, but not actually able to win here. And just going to riffle through the deck just for kicks. No cards that really matter. And that is the game right there. So going to game 3 here with Elliott yet again with Goblins. Of course, being on the play in game 3 certainly preferable and gives a big advantage. That previous game, if Storm was on the play, it would have been a turn 1 win with all of the 0 casting cost artifacts. And that Chalice of the Void really doing its job. Such a powerful effect. Anytime you have a card that's actually restricted in Vintage, but playable as a 4-of in Legacy, those are cards that generally have my attention. Cards like Brainstorm, Ponder, Chalice of the Void, even a card like Lodestone Golem, I have a feeling is underplayed in Legacy, given that it's actually restricted in Vintage. And we are starting to see just a little bit of that tinkering going on with Lodestone in some of those robot-built affinity decks. That card does a lot to hinder some of the best strategies in the game. Of course, in Vintage, you have Mishra's Workshop as the reason why Lodestone Golem was as dominant. A lot easier to cast when your lands are tapping for 3 instead of just 2, but still a turn later is not the end of the world. Alright, so Elliott here. Gonna see if he can pull off the upset versus Storm. Play proceeding at a solid pace. 20 minutes in, 2 games down, half hour for the last game. Highly unlikely that this one goes to time. This is a new type of commentary that we're trying out here at Brainstorm MTG. If this is the type of thing you like to see, go ahead and let us know in the comments. Let us know how we can improve. Already had some great feedback and made some minor tweaks to the way that we're making this happen. 2, 4, 6, 7 cards in hand. That looked pretty horrific. 1 mana probe. That is a garbage hand right there. Empty the Warrens in hand, generally only good if you've got a ton of fast mana. Emptying for 12 or so Goblins on the first turn can be very powerful. And of course, versus Goblins, having those blockers against the Goblin Lackey, very relevant. Going to really slow down the type of lines that could mop up those Goblins in terms of Empty the Warrens, in terms of Matron for Goblin Sharpshooter and those type of lines. Once you have those Goblins in play, it's a bit difficult to actually connect with the Lackey, to say the least. Alright, so Elliot staying pat. Got to expect he has some disruption. And Storm going to 6. Storm perhaps a little bit better at mulliganing than some of the other combo decks. So many explosive hands. Plenty of potential first turn wins with as low as 5 cards in hand, really. I suppose you could actually have a 3-card win just with Lion's Eye Diamond, and then Probe, crack the Lion's Eyes of response, and then Ad Nauseam. But it looks like the shields are going to be down. Probe shows a fistful of Goblins and some land mana disruption. Cards like Wasteland and Rishadan Port. So it looks like going to have to be careful with the mana base here. Get a basic island in order to ponder, and hope to set something up before that Rishadan Port starts taking island offline. Rishadan Port, one of those cards people are wondering if it's going to be in Masters 25. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think Port's going to be reprinted? Is that a card you want to be holding on to or selling right now? And we got Lion's Eye, Lotus Petal, and another basic island. Anytime you have Tutors and Lion's Eye Diamonds, you have some decisions to make. Of course, Lion's Eye Diamond cannot be used to cast spells most of the time. In general, it can be used when you're playing cards as flashback from the graveyard off Past in Flames, but typically not able to use it to actually cast spells. However, when we're keeping a Lion's Eye Diamond, you generally are going to be sacrificing it in response to your own tutor, holding priority, giving you a 3 or 6 mana boost. And there's the basic swamp. Getting hit by Lackey here would be pretty awful, and there's plenty of mana in hand, so let's see what the line is here. Looks like there's 2 clear options. Lotus Petal, Lion's Eye Diamond, Cabal Ritual, and Infernal Tutor. So 2 obvious plays here. One would be Empty the Warrens, and then be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 12 Goblins, depending on how much extra mana there is. You can always Infernal for Infernal, or get an extra Infernal in there, period, just to bump up the Storm one. So it looks like it'd be 14 Goblins here, if there's 5, 6, 7 cards, yes. So that is one possibility. The other option, Ad Nauseam. Past in Flames, not an option here. Past in Flames generally going to want more than just a singleton ritual to make that worthwhile. And we've got Lotus Petal, Lion's Eye Diamond. Can Infernal Tutor, cannot actually get to Threshold with the Cabal Ritual, unfortunately. with the mana off of Cabal Ritual, going to cast Infernal. One of my favorite lines with this list is to go ahead and stack up an Infernal and a Cabal Ritual, and then dump a bunch of artifacts into the graveyard, especially Lion's Eye Diamond, and what that'll do is actually activate Threshold and give you Hellbent while both cards are on the stack. Cabal Ritual actually checking on resolution, not when you cast the spell, in order to see if you get 3 or 5 black mana. Anytime a Storm player is holding priority in response to their own stuff, it's generally going to be ugly. And we'll see. I mean, it could go either way here. With 4 mana floating, empty could be a line. From 17, though, it looks like Ad Nauseam might get the nod. There's still 4 mana floating, so a Lotus Petal would be available. Of course, having already played a land, you're going to really need to draw into some rituals or more Lotus Petals. But 17 is a lot. That is a lot of life. These are the type of decisions that make Storm such an interesting deck. The power level so high, but it can be difficult to know in a tournament setting which line is best. And I mean, in this type of instance, it's actually really difficult to know for certain which line is stronger. Both of them have a very small amount of outs for the opponent. I'd love to know which line you guys would take, if you'd go with Empty the Warrens, or if you think Ad Nauseam is the safer play here, or if there's a line that I'm just not seeing. We've got a Storm 5 right now. So 14 Goblins, or no, it's going to be Ad Nauseam. So Ad Nauseam from here is going to need to see Dark Ritual or Lotus Petal, as there's only 1 mana left floating and a land drop has already been made. Storm 6, 17 life to be used for this Ad Nauseam. And let's see what the deck has in store. Empty the Warrens right off the top. That's 4 damage. Not really the best card you could draw there. And life total quickly going. There's a Dark Ritual. Infernal. And there's the Lotus Petal. So got enough for, let's see, if it's Storm 6, 7, 8, 9. That is enough to get 18 Goblins in play. 7 life left. Nothing in the deck that can actually kill from here. However, a Dark Petition would put you within Tarfire range. So there is a decision to make here. Looks like right now, Empty the Warren's the most likely plan. Of course, a Lion's Eye Diamond coming off the top of the deck would be lethal. There's a Cabal Ritual. That adds an additional 3 black, and that could be lethal. Let's see here. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, there's no Lion's Eye Diamond, so that Infernal not going to actually be able to get the Tendrils. We've got black mana, Storm 8, 3 black, plenty of threshold at this point, so that Cabal Ritual is going to bump us up to 6 black. No way of using that Infernal Tutor to get Cabal Ritual. Have to keep that Lotus Petal for red for the Empty the Warrens. 6 black, 9, and oh, interesting line here. So Empty the Warrens, keeping that Infernal Tutor, so could have had a higher Storm count if that Infernal Tutor was just fired off just to get a whatever from hand. It looks like there was some cantrips, Brainstorm, Preordain, that type of card left in hand. So neglecting to get the extra 2 goblins. And there's a Goblin Pile Driver on Elliot's side. Preordain. Puts both on the bottom. Another cantrip in hand. Going to need to keep some number of guys home. Do not want to get blown out by a War Chief. War Chief and a land would be exactly 5 damage off of Goblin Pile Driver. Alright, so it looks like 1 is getting blocked. 15 are coming through. Of course, that empty would have actually been lethal had that Infernal Tutor been fired off. There is no justice. It did not matter. That is it. Goblins do win the match, just not the little red men followed by the mountains. It is just from Empty the Warrens. So that is the match. All right, well, despite that little misplay at the end, perhaps not so little, that is often the difference between winning and losing, but still got there with Storm. So this has been ELD for Brainstorm MTG. Thanks for watching.